Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am incredibly excited to guide you through this one because we're diving deep into James Clear's absolute game changer of a framework from Atomic Habits. We're going to break down exactly how small, daily, honestly kind of seemingly insignificant changes can actually compound into massive, totally life-altering transformations. You know, we so often think that massive success requires this huge, dramatic action, right? But as we're about to see, the real secret, it's literally hiding in the tiny details. To kick things off, I want to pose a really fascinating question to you. How on earth do you transform 110 years of absolute soul-crushing failure into Olympic gold? It's a staggering mystery. We are talking about British cycling here. The governing body for professional cycling in Great Britain had endured nearly a century of just pure mediocrity. I mean, since 1908, British riders had won a grand total of one single gold medal at the Olympic Games. And in 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. In fact, it was so bad, get this, that a top bike manufacturer in Europe actually refused to sell bikes to the team. They were genuinely terrified it would ruin their sales if other professionals saw the Brits riding their gear. Imagine being that bad. But then, everything flips. In 2003, they bring in this guy, Dave Brailsford, as the new performance director. And the results are just insane. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team completely dominated the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, taking home an astounding 60% of the available gold medals. Boom. 4 years later in London, they set 9 Olympic records, and over the span of just 6 years, they captured 5 Tour de France victories. So, how does a team of historically ordinary, almost laughed-at athletes suddenly become world champions? Well, it proves that the system we're about to explore produces undeniable, real-world results. So what was Brailsford's secret? He had this relentless, unwavering commitment to a core strategy he called the aggregation of marginal gains. Now that sounds like a fancy corporate buzzword, but it wasn't about finding some magic bullet or completely tearing down the team and starting over. It was simply the philosophy of breaking down every single component you could possibly think of that goes into riding a bike, and then just improving it by 1%. That's it. The whole idea is that when you stack all those tiny 1% improvements together, you get a massive, undeniable explosion in performance. And they didn't just tell the guys to train harder. No, they got incredibly granular. They started looking for these 1% improvements in completely unexpected, unconventional areas. They redesigned the bike seats for slightly better comfort. They literally rubbed alcohol on the tires to get a tiny bit more grip. They had riders wear electrically heated overshorts to maintain the absolute perfect muscle temperature. They even hired a surgeon, yes, a surgeon, to teach each rider the absolute best way to wash their hands, just to reduce the chance of catching a cold. They even painted the inside of the team truck white so they could spot tiny specks of dust that might degrade their finely tuned bikes. Adding up hundreds of these tiny, almost laughable changes is exactly what led directly to their historic dominance. Okay, so to really grasp how this works in our own everyday lives, imagine you are piloting a flight from Los Angeles across the country to New York City. If you leave LAX and adjust your heading by just 3.5 degrees south, you won't land in New York. You're going to end up in Washington, D.C. Now at takeoff, that small change is barely noticeable, right? The nose of the plane moves just a few feet. But when you magnify that tiny shift across the entire United States, you end up hundreds of miles apart from your target. That's exactly how habits work. A slight change in your daily habits gently nudges your trajectory, guiding your life to a profoundly different destination over the span of a lifetime. And this brings us to the hard math of it all. Habits are essentially the compound interest of self-improvement. If you can manage to get just 1% better each day for one single year, the math shows you will end up nearly 38 times better by the time you're done. 38 times! Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for a year, you basically decline all the way down to 0. What starts as just a small win or a really minor setback accumulates over time into something much, much bigger. But, and this is a big but, habits are a double-edged sword. It's so important to remember that. Positive actions, like learning a new idea or helping someone out, those multiply into vast knowledge and super strong networks over time. But negative things, they compound just as easily. The daily micro-stresses of sitting in a traffic jam or a tiny habit of negative self-talk. By themselves, on a random Tuesday, they're manageable. But repeated day after day, they compound into severe health issues or a really toxic worldview. Ultimately, you get what you repeat. Now, here is where literally all of us get stuck. And honestly, the ice cube metaphor perfectly normalizes that intense frustration we feel. So imagine an ice cube sitting on a table right in front of you. The room is cold, let's say 25 degrees. Slowly, it starts heating up. 26, 27, 28 degrees. The ice cube is still just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. You're putting in the work, you get it to 29, 30, 31 degrees. Still no visible change whatsoever. Then it hits 32 degrees, and the ice finally begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, which seems completely identical to all the temperature increases before it, suddenly unlocks this huge change. So when you start a new habit and you don't see immediate tangible results, just remember the ice cube. To really drive this home, check out this incredible quote from the social reformer Jacob Riis. This is actually hung up in the locker room of the wildly successful San Antonio Spurs basketball team. It goes, "When nothing seems to help, I go and look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split in two, and I know it was not that last blow that did it, but all that had gone before." The absolute crucial point here is that your early hard work, it isn't wasted at all. It's simply being stored up for your eventual breakthrough. And this exact phenomenon creates what's known as the valley of disappointment. We're human, right? We all expect progress to be a straight, linear line. We want to put in the work and see the results immediately. But reality just doesn't work that way. The most powerful outcomes are always delayed. And this right here is exactly why people quit their good habits. They put in weeks of serious effort, they find themselves stuck deep in this valley of disappointment, and they throw in the towel right before they cross that critical threshold where the compounding finally takes off and breaks through the plateau of latent potential. So to actually survive that valley and make these habits stick for good, we need a massive foundational paradigm shift. Prevailing wisdom always tells us we need specific, actionable goals. But if you actually want better results, forget them. Seriously, ignore your goals. Goals are merely about the results you want to achieve. Systems, on the other hand, are about the actual processes that lead to those results. As they say, the score will take care of itself if you just focus on the daily practice. Let's just systematically dismantle this conventional goal-setting wisdom right now, because there are 4 massive problems with relying on goals. First off, winners and losers have the exact same goals. Every single Olympian wants the gold medal. The goal doesn't differentiate them at all, the system does. Second, achieving a goal is purely momentary. Think about it. If you clean a messy room but you keep your sloppy habits, that room is just going to get messy again by next week. You're treating the symptom, not the root cause. Third, goals restrict your happiness. You're basically constantly telling yourself, I can't be happy until I cross that specific finish line. And fourth, the yo-yo effect. Runners will train for months, run the big race, and then literally stop running the next day because the goal is gone. Goals are fundamentally at odds with long-term sustained progress. So it really all boils down to this one profound idea. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. This is everything. If you're struggling to change your habits, the problem actually isn't you, and it's definitely not a lack of desire or willpower. Bad habits repeat themselves again and again simply because you have the wrong system for change. You have to fix the inputs if you want to fix the outputs. To truly master our systems, though, we need to understand the underlying psychological core of behavior change. I want you to think of it exactly like the layers of an onion. To really hack our habits, we have to understand which layer we're currently operating on, and more importantly, the direction in which we are trying to create that change. Okay, so the outermost layer of the onion is layer 1, outcomes. This level is concerned entirely with changing your results. Losing 10 pounds, publishing a book, winning a championship. Most of the goals you set in your life are associated with this outer level. It's fundamentally about what you get. And what we usually find is that almost everyone mistakenly starts their habit journey completely hyper-focused on this outermost layer. But stepping one layer deeper, we hit layer 2, processes. Now, this level is concerned with changing your habits and your systems. It represents the actual behavioral steps you take to improve your daily routines. This is like implementing a brand new workout program at the gym or finally figuring out a system to declutter your desk for a better workflow. So if outcomes are what you get, processes are what you do. But right at the center, the deepest, absolutely most critical layer is identity. This core is concerned with changing your beliefs, your worldview, your deep-seated judgments about yourself and others. It's all about what you believe. And here's the catch. True, lasting behavioral change is practically impossible if your underlying self-image conflicts with your new actions. You can try a new diet process to get a new weight outcome, sure, but if your identity is someone who subconsciously prioritizes comfort over accomplishment, you are inevitably going to sabotage your own plans. A perfect example of this is the story of Brian Clark. He's an entrepreneur who had this terrible, lifelong nervous habit of chewing his fingernails down to the quick. Brute force willpower never, ever worked for him. So one day he asks his wife to schedule him for his first ever manicure. He figured, hey, if I pay money for this, maybe the financial investment will stop the habit. But what actually happened was wild. The manicurist finished up and told him that underneath it all, he actually had really healthy, attractive nails. And suddenly, for the very first time in his life, he felt proud of his fingernails. He took real pride in them. He completely shifted away from a strained, willpower-based process and instead anchored onto the pride of a new identity. And guess what? He literally never chewed his nails again. And that brings us to the ultimate question for you to ponder today. Who do you wish to become? It's really time to stop obsessing over what you want to achieve. Behavior that doesn't align with your self-image simply will not last. So instead, I want you to focus on the identity you want to build. Design those small, systemic 1% atomic habits and treat them as little daily votes for your future self. Because ultimately, remember, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems. So, what system are you going to build tomorrow?